Welcome to the Intuitive Therapist Podcast with Janis R. Cohen, therapist, clairvoyant, empath, and medium. Listen in as she takes a no-nonsense deep dive into real human struggles and how to resolve them. Janis will share channeled information from her spirit guide team, as well as the angels and archangels, to help you master your emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual destiny. And now, Janis R. Cohen.
Hey y'all, this is Janis Cohen, the Intuitive Therapist, here on the Intuitive Therapist Podcast. Have you been living with a mask on? Now, most people are going to say no. Oh, no, I don't live with a mask. But maybe you are. If you are not being truly authentic in your life, you're wearing a mask. Maybe you've worn that mask for so long, you don't even realize it's there. But there's something inside of you that is done with all of that posturing and pretending. It's exhausting to pretend you're somebody else. It's exhausting to try to work so hard to please other people and fit in when all you want to do is scream and not fit in. All you want to do is just be who you want to be, whether that's happy or sad or artistic or weird or funky or whatever. So something inside of you maybe is done with all that posturing and pretending. Something inside of you is screaming to express your truth. And today, I'm handing you the map to get there. I want to talk today about how to move into unobstructed authenticity and spiritual integrity. Now, I've talked about authenticity often. Especially around October, November. I actually did a whole series for midlife women. So I think it was 6 or 7 episodes about living an authentic life. So you can actually go back and look at October, November-ish and see all of those and listen to all those episodes. But unobstructed authenticity, spiritual integrity, these aren't just words. They're a way of being that'll completely shift your reality. But first, you've got to be willing to unlearn everything that's kept you small. And if you're ready to do that, keep listening. If you're curious but not ready, keep listening. If you're not ready, listen, and maybe something today will have an impact on you that invites you to step into your truth. So as you listen, notice what resonates deeply today, because that's your truth breaking through. And as your truth awakens, feel the shift happening inside you right now. Okay? Now, what is unobstructed authenticity and spiritual integrity, you might ask? Okay, so unobstructed authenticity means living without distortion, without dilution, without apology. It's when you stop bending yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold you. It's when nothing is in your way of you being you. You don't allow anything to get in your way. You are absolutely, unapologetically you. Okay? But if you haven't been living, if you've been living that way in your life, that's amazing. Congratulations. You are in the 1% of humans that are actually doing that. But if you haven't been, right? If you haven't been living your life totally authentically and with spiritual integrity, then today is going to help you understand why and what you can do to change that. So spiritual integrity is when the alignment of your soul's truth is aligned with the actions, thoughts, and energy that you have. You might be saying, well, I don't know what my soul truth is. Well, have you ever paid attention to your desires, the things that you like, what you're interested in? That's your soul's truth, okay? So your soul's truth is not about perfection. It's not about external validation. It's about honoring what you know is right, the spiritual alignment, right? Spiritual alignment, spiritual integrity. It's honoring what you know is right, even when it's inconvenient, even when it disrupts the norm. It's about knowing yourself so fucking well that you know what you value, you know what your rules are, and what you will and won't accept, that you would rather stand alone and in your power than give away your power by complying with the status quo. Now that's huge. I'm going to say it again. This is what spiritual integrity is. This is my definition. You might come up with something else. I would love to hear about it. And if that's the case, hit me up on Instagram at the Intuitive Therapist. Send me an email at support@janisrcohen.com. Tell me what your definition of spiritual integrity is, and maybe even make a comment, right? It's about honoring what you know is right, even when it's inconvenient, even when it disrupts the norm, even when it makes other people uncomfortable. It's about knowing yourself so well, knowing what you value, knowing what your rules are, and what you will and won't accept, that you would rather stand alone in your power than give away your power by complying with the status quo and sacrificing who you are. That is spiritual integrity. That is authenticity. What if the way you've been taught to behave isn't actually who you are? Have you ever thought about that? What if everything you've been suppressing is the key to your highest freedom? This is what spiritual integrity is about. This is what unobstructed authenticity is about. Who are you really? Can you own that? And what if all these parts of you that you've judged and minimized and shoved down and pretended not to have, or any of these aspects of you, are actually your greatest strengths that will allow you to stand out and achieve your life purpose and your mission in ways that you couldn't even imagine were so beautiful? You didn't come into this world afraid to be yourself. Do you realize that? You were taught to shrink, taught to censor. You were taught to conform. Now, other people's limitations that you were conditioned with are the blocks that keep you stuck. So I'm going to share what that means. Now, here's what I know. No parent intends to do this with their kids, yet we all carry our limiting beliefs with us into our relationships, work, romance, parenting, etc. And unless you're consciously intentional about what you believe, think, and do 100% of the time, it's likely that you're acting from a place of having been conditioned yourself and are unknowingly living within those confines of other people's limitations and judgments as we speak. Does this make sense? With spiritual integrity, you don't conform to anybody else's rules and expectations. You only live true to yourself, no matter what it costs you. And that statement right there, that you are not willing to sacrifice who you are from one moment in 1 degree, that you are willing, and I just looked at the timer, it's 8:18, that no matter what it costs you, you will stand true to yourself. You won't cave. So what could be getting in the way of you living with both unobstructed authenticity and spiritual integrity? Here are the common blocks to both of those things. Big one, number one, fear of rejection. I deal with people all the time. I was just talking with a client who is a man in his late 50s, early 60s, who is just coming into his spiritual expression. All of a sudden, within the past year, he has been guided to explore consciousness and spirituality and all of that. And the people around him don't know anything about that world. So he's new and learning about it, and he would love for his family to support him, but they're not there yet. So I encouraged him to stop trying to convince the family his wife, his kids, to embrace what he's learning about and just grow on his own. And so he's agreed and decided to do that. And so he has been able to let go of the fear of rejection because living his life now, as we all should, it has nothing to do with whether other people get on board. It's how can I uncover the truth of who I am and live in that? Whoever will follow will follow. Whatever relationships I need to maintain, I will. But I am true to myself. So the fear of rejection is this need for approval that keeps you imprisoned in a false identity, right? You perform, you please, and you pretend. And the false identity is, I'm not being who I truly am. That's the false identity. Now, the second common block is people pleasing, where you prioritize being likable over being real. So why is that a problem? Well, you fear that who you are isn't good enough. That's really what it comes down to. And that who you are isn't acceptable. And when you prioritize being liked over being real, or likable over being real, you're squelching your truth. And at some point or another, that denial, that suppression, and that neglect of who you truly are, of being, speaking, and acting in your truth, it's going to show up in how you make decisions, because your decisions are going to be for other people, not you. And I just saw the time on the clock as I'm recording this, 11:11. What you believe about yourself and others, right? It's going to show up in your judgments. It's going to show up in the illnesses that your body develops because it's harboring toxic energy of denial and suppression. These are all real things, and you'll never be truly able to have honest, intimate relationships with others if you're not yourself. Impossible. It's impossible. I know in my relationship with my husband, we've seen all aspects of each other. The shitty aspects where we get on each other's nerves and we piss each other off, and then the very deep, vulnerable aspects and everything in between. Our intellectual aspect, our sexual aspect, our spiritual aspect, our growing aspect, our little kid-like aspect, like everything. And I couldn't have this kind of deep, fulfilling relationship if I wasn't fully comfortable with who I am and if I didn't know who I was, right? You're never going to be able to have honest, intimate relationships with others if all you do is prioritize being likable over being real. You'll never let anyone know who you truly are because you're afraid they're going to reject you because you haven't fully accepted yourself. Any fear you have of anything that other people will do, that projection is something that you must turn back on you and say, how can I eliminate this fear by honoring this in myself? If I'm afraid I'll be rejected by other people, how can I show myself more acceptance and love? If I'm afraid that people will be disappointed of me, how can I show myself more approval? If I'm afraid people won't love me, how can I show myself more love? If I'm afraid that nobody will find me attractive, I must find myself attractive. Do you see? So any people pleasing is a projection of fear that who you are is not good enough, and that's the work that needs to be done. Now, the third thing is a conditioned identity. You play a role based on family, your culture, or religion, not based on your truth. We all do this. None of what I'm saying is a criticism, please. But it's true. We all do this or have done this. And is there anywhere else in your life, I'm just curious, where you give yourself permission to show up authentically in spite of the type of pressure? And maybe you do that, right? I used to do that. I used to be able to compartmentalize how I showed up because my parents expected one thing, my friends expected another version of me, whoever I dated at the time expected another. In my work, I showed up differently. Now there's this is what you get all the time. Whether you work with me, whether you're my friend, whether you're my parent, or whoever encounters me, this is what you get. And that is the product of doing the work to get back to wholeness. And so, where do you give yourself permission to show up authentically in spite of the type of pressure to comply with family rules, cultural or religious rules? Right? Now, the fourth one is the fear of disrupting others. This is another block. Your real self might trigger discomfort in those around you, right? So, I want you to ask yourself this question if this one resonates with you. What is the consequence that you're going to suffer if others become uncomfortable or disagree with you? What is the consequence? What is the fear? If I disrupt others, if I trigger others' discomfort, what will that mean about me? That's another way. Who are you if you're someone who triggers discomfort in others around you? Now, my younger self would have said I was bad or wrong. Okay? My adult self now is like, fuck yeah, let me trigger somebody. It's my job to trigger change and help people shift. But what that means, if I trigger something in you, it means that I am being a part of helping highlight what isn't working. Whatever you're triggered by, it's not resolved, right? So I'm happy if I'm triggering you. Good. And maybe I'm not the person that you need in your life to help teach you things. Totally fine with that. Not a problem. I don't judge you. But I do attract people who are ready for the wisdom. And they like my style. They're okay with my cussing. They're okay with me using my life as examples. They're okay with how I work. Great. I'm fine if I make people uncomfortable, right? Because I know my intention. Now, the fifth one is self-doubt and imposter syndrome. This is big, big, big with most people. Who am I? You might ask yourself, who am I to live so boldly? Huge question. I'd like you to work on that. I'd like you to write that question down. Who am I to live this boldly? Meaning completely authentic, speak my truth, no matter who it is, and honor where I am, honor me. You can't ever step into your authenticity and call in what you want if you're faking who you are. You'll never, ever, ever. And there's so much ease and joy when you embrace who you are fully. So I want you to take a moment right now. Take a nice, big, deep breath in and slowly exhale. And imagine as you're breathing, with each breath in and each breath out, shedding layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, and keep breathing and exhaling until every false layer of yourself is gone. And only the raw, real essence of you, the unshaken, the unapologetic, the unchained version of you is standing before you, that you are embodying that. Where you're not worried about what anybody says. You go along your day, you're like, I'm good with who I am. I follow my gut. I trust my gut. I am fine with how I live my life, right? How does that feel? Try that on. And then I'd like you to take a moment and journal about this. So now the question becomes, how do you move beyond your conditioning and really step into your authenticity? So here's the path to unobstructed authenticity. Some of these things I've talked about, and I'm going to go through them fairly quickly, but feel free to listen to this episode again, take some notes. There's some very clear pieces that, 4 key pieces that I've identified that will really, really help. The first is radical self-recognition. Talked about this, I've referred to this a little bit today. But who were you before the world told you who to be? right? There's a lot of journal prompts in here today. Maybe go back and listen to this. Like I said, answer this question. Who were you before the world told you who to be? And if you knew there were no consequences, if you knew that nothing negative would happen to you, if you chose to be yourself, how would you describe who you truly are? If you knew nobody would judge you, who are you? Write down what lights you up, what angers you, what you long for, and figure out how to own every single piece of that so that if somebody came up to you and they interviewed you because they admired you and they said, hey, you, substitute your name there, hey, you, what lights you up, what angers you, and who are you? You'd be able to answer that. Second, releasing external approval. Look, you are not here to be palatable. Let me say that again. You have not been put on this earth to be fucking palatable so that others are comfortable. You are not. You are here to live your life, live in purpose, shine a light to help others live theirs, and to shake this world up so that it shifts and changes and grows and evolves. The more real you are, the more you'll piss people off who aren't comfortable with who they are. I encountered this time and time and time again. The more real I am, the more uncomfortable other people are who aren't real. That's their challenge for growth, not your burden to bear. And once you realize that you aren't responsible for how others choose to react to your authenticity, then letting go of the need for approval is way easier. Remember that. Third, speaking unfiltered truth. Now, say what you mean and mean what you say. Many people have a hard time with this because it will cause other people to feel uncomfortable, and it will cause other people to be put off. It could. Likely, if you speak your truth, it will cause people to be put off. But the more comfortable you are with yourself, the more you realize that if you say something that jars somebody else and you're not bothered by it, it's just an expression of your truth. And it's okay that other people are uncomfortable with your truth. It's completely fine. So I want you to catch yourself when you soften or shrink your words. Speak from power, not from fear. So, for example, when somebody compliments you and they say, oh my gosh, that's such a great shirt. And you go, oh, yeah, I got it on sale at TJ. It was just this cheap thing. Versus saying a simple thank you and accepting and receiving that, right? Speak from power, not fear. Don't ever dumb yourself down, shrink yourself down, any of that. And this is a tough one, or it can be a tough one. It's okay to pick your battles when it comes to making your point. This is so important. However, the only way for others to know where you stand is for you to show up in your truth. So when you aren't showing up with malice or contempt, you aren't bothered by whether or not others accept you. You're simply at peace with being you and living from a place of joy, love, and peace. Okay? So it's important that, for me, this is the way I live. I don't want to convince anybody of anything. I really don't. If you buy in, you buy in. If you don't, you don't. There are enough people in my world that resonate with me so highly. And even if there weren't, I wouldn't spend any time, not a moment, trying to convince anybody of anything. All I know is what I know. All I know is myself, and I stand firm in who I am. And that's enough. And I can hold space for people who don't accept that. I can hold space for people who have differing ideas. I love that. I love hearing people's difference of opinions. And I don't intend to be right. I just intend to be honest. Okay? So living in full soul alignment is the fourth piece I want to share. Does your external life reflect your internal truth? This is what alignment is. When we live in alignment in all aspects of our lives, and very few of us do, by the way, very few. I'm still working on certain aspects of my life, and I've been doing personal growth and development since I'm 25. And, we are being true to ourselves. Alignment means that you are vibrating at the same frequency as your truth, that you live your values, that you practice integrity with your values, that maybe, you also practice honesty, humility, conviction, patience. And no one can knock you off your alignment. The same way that nobody can knock you off your certainty unless you let them. When you're in full alignment, it's like you just kind of, whatever you're doing, whoever you're being, whatever you're speaking, whatever you're believing, however you are feeling, it just feels right and easy. That's alignment. Now, as you ascend, you know how they say, new level, new devil. The more you grow, the more challenges you're going to encounter. But your challenges are guiding you to know yourself even better and more. That's what challenges are. They're not there to make your life miserable. They're like, here's this test, pass it, check, know who you are. Boom, next obstacle, next experience. Do you really know yourself? Okay, here's a God test. You know yourself? Deal with this. Become more clear with who you are, right? That's just life. So if you can't live in full soul alignment, isn't it time to make bold, uncompromising shifts to do that? So I'd like you to write down your top 10 values. Then choose the top 5 and write them down each on a separate piece of paper. Identify with each separate piece, identify what you can do more of and what you can do less of to be in full alignment with that part of your life. Right? We all have aspects that we're not doing enough of. We all have aspects that we want to do more of to live in alignment. Maybe that's meditation. Maybe that's speaking positively to yourself. Maybe that's doing only what you love. Maybe that is starting your own business because you have felt a calling to do it, and keeping your job until you're able to dismiss your job because you can afford to. You see? So this is going to give you immense clarity about why and or why not your life gets the results that it gets. So right now, feel yourself stepping into this new identity, the identity of somebody who moves through the world as their true, untamed, limitless self. Imagine that, which is true in quantum, that in the quantum field that aspect of you already exists. And I want you to lock in and live from that place right now. What would he or she be doing, speaking, saying, dressing, wearing, all of that? Now, what happens when you finally live in full alignment? When you stop shape-shifting, stop censoring, and stop settling? Well, the very simple answer to that is magic. So here's what awaits you when you're able to do that. You attract aligned opportunities effortlessly. Your relationships shift. Some are going to fade because not everybody's meant to be in your life, but the right ones will stay and they'll thrive. And you'll meet new people. Your inner peace skyrockets because you're no longer fighting yourself. It's huge, huge, huge. That's what living authentically gives you. You're not in a battle with yourself. You're not in a battle. Period. And you become magnetic because your truth is the most powerful frequency there is. Did you know that? Authenticity has a higher frequency than any other emotion, even love. There was a scientific study, I can't remember who did it, but they measured the frequency of love, and supposedly love is the highest frequency, right? Love or above. There's, I think, love and grace. Grace is above love. But authenticity is the highest frequency there is, right? It's godlike. When you are truly who you know you are, and you're living in your truth, you are an expression of God. Imagine waking up every morning knowing you never have to pretend again. Feel how liberating that is. This is where you're heading when you do this work. Now, how do you use all of this to step into prosperity in all the ways in your life? Well, I know you know this. Prosperity, it's not just money. It's freedom. Most people, when they think of abundance, are like, I want money. Yeah, of course. Don't be ashamed about that. Hell yeah. But prosperity is also good health. It's freedom, it's energy, it's alignment, it's your birthright. Prosperity is intellectual growth, spiritual growth. Prosperity is honoring your vessel, your body, so that it's healthy. That's prosperity. Are there other ways that you experience prosperity? Now, here's how you claim full prosperity. Now, some of these may sound like they're, I don't know, what's the saying? Shooting in the wind? I don't know what the saying is. Like they just sound lovely, but they're not realistic. But I'd like you to consider that they are. Okay, so decide that you're done playing small. And the only way you can do that is if you're willing to look at the limiting beliefs that have kept you small. And you every day, and you're working through them, and you're realizing that any limiting belief you have, it has really come from somebody else. It's true. It's come from your conditioning. Don't be too loud. Kids aren't meant to be seen. They're not meant to be heard. They're meant to be seen, right? If you speak up, you're causing trouble. Don't cause trouble. I heard that most of my life. Don't cause trouble, Janis. I had a big mouth and I always spoke up, right? So that was something that I decided to embrace. I'm like, you know what? I can appreciate that my parents had that limitation. I don't. So I'm going to speak up, right? Say it out loud. I will no longer betray myself to make others feel comfortable in any way, because it is an actual betrayal of self. Second, take aligned action today. One small step that reflects your highest truth. That could be aligned action. That could be, I'm going to get him and go take a walk because I'm tired of sitting here. I've got to go take a walk. Or I'll eat this kind of food versus that. Or I'll say something nice to myself to encourage myself. Or I'll start that project. Or I'll put out an offer. Whatever it is, right? Take one small step that reflects your highest truth. The third is rewrite your subconscious narrative. And this is where we become aware of the limiting beliefs. We understand why they're there, that they're just familiar and it feels comfortable and it's a pattern, but we want to end it, right? So we must shift how we speak to ourselves, because the only fear that we have is the fear, really, that other people are going to judge us. So there's some consequence to us being who we are. So you might say something like, I am safe to be fully seen. I release all attachments to approval. My truth is my power. Now, if you feel any resistance from these three, go deep in there. Go do that work. Rummage around in that and find the limiting belief. And then unearth it, disprove it, and channel a better belief, right? So from this moment forward, I'd like to invite you to walk as the highest version of yourself. The doors that were once closed are now open. You are no longer available for anything less than full alignment, because your new life begins right now. If this episode shifted something inside of you, hey, reach out, let me know. on Instagram at The Intuitive Therapist, via email, support at janisrcohen.com. Write a comment on iTunes, write and share this with somebody who could benefit from listening to it. And remember, you're never meant to fit in. You were meant to lead, to disrupt, and to rise. And I'm looking forward to seeing you, hearing you, speaking to you in the next episode. Don't forget to rate and write a review of my podcast. As always, I wish you a blessed day, a wonderful week. Always live intuitively.
Thanks for listening to The Intuitive Therapist. If you like what you heard, the best compliment you can give us is to share this podcast with a friend. And be sure to give us some stars and a favorable review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in.